Welcome to the iLearn Virtual Campus. Please sign up for a free iLearn membership on our website, check out our 7th annual conference coming next spring 2021, and let us know if you're interested in hosting events or leasing space on our campus by emailing campus@immersivelrn.org.
Hi, Lucas. Are you the film crew, right?
Hi, Francisco. Hi. Hi, Joe. We're still missing Qiu Shizhou for the third presentation.
Hello, Lily.
Hey, Francisco. I didn't say the Qiu Shizhou of the third presentation, the speaker.
Okay, we are going to find him or her.
Okay.
I don't know. And if
it's a boy, I think
okay.
it's a boy.
Okay, perfect. So if he has some issues with connection, you can play the video.
Okay.
Then we'll give him some time. If he doesn't show up, you can say to the audience to send the questions to Hopa. But probably he will arrive because he confirmed that he was going to be here. So probably it's just a matter of time, okay?
Okay, sure, no problem.
Okay, perfect. I think in 1 minute, I'm going to announce you in the session, okay?
Okay, sure.
Great. Thanks, Lily.
It's okay. Thank you.
Hi, can I help you?
Hello, everyone. Morning. It's my pleasure to announce the next technical session, Walking in XR. I'm going to pass the word to my colleague, Professor Lily Wang. It's a pleasure to receive you, Lily. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm Lily Wang from the Beihang University, Beijing, China. Welcome to session 17, Working in XR. This year, we have a very different experience with IEEE ISMA in this very beautiful Villa campus. Although we all regret not being able to go to Brazil, we can still experience the beauty of the beach in Wabela and enjoy the local food and drinks made according to the recipe shared by the conference. I want to thank all the organizers for their hard work. I know Joe, Paulo, and Francisco hold more than a dozen meetings every day these days. So thank you. And in this session, we have 6 presentations. The first one is Walking and Teleportation in Wide Area Virtual Reality Experience. The speaker is S17. S17 is a PhD candidate of Media, Art, and Technology at the University of California. San Barbara. He is interested in virtual reality and manual and automated method of creating 3D environment. Let's welcome the speaker.
Hello, my name is S17, and I'm going to present our work walking and teleportation in wide area virtual reality experiences. Our work is the first comparative study of natural walking in a wide area VR experience. We compare walking and teleportation in preference, presence, simulator sickness, pointing task performance, and space coverage. We also investigate the transfer of known previous knowledge of real walking benefits, both to wider areas and lightweight mobile VR devices. Our results show that walking in wide area VR outperforms teleportation in terms of simulator sickness and user preference. We also observe a trend towards higher presence for walking against teleportation. With advancements in mobile and untethered VR technology, many companies have started to create a wide area VR experience in recent years. Oculus, Dead and Buried Arena, The Void, Mission X, Triton VR, Cyber Action Arena, and many more. Here you can see our work's relation to previous work. As you can see, our study addresses a gap in the literature by comparing natural walking and teleportation in wide area. Now we are going to discuss the experiment. We use Lenovo Mirage, a 6 degrees of freedom mobile VR headset that runs Android. We use Unity for our development purposes. Our experiment is performed in an indoor roller hockey rink of 61 by 26 meters at UCSB. We had to enhance the features by placing markers on the ground. We also provided noise canceling headphones to remove the existing noise. Since it was a mobile system, we had to develop a web app to monitor and administer the experiment seamlessly. We also record user interaction for playback and analysis. We had 5 scenes in total for virtual environments, 2 indoor scenes, 2 outdoor scenes, and 1 tutorial scene. The 2 indoor scenes were from Matterport 3D dataset. They were selected to be similar in looks and complexity. For the outdoor scenes, we modeled the scenes using 3D assets. We also aim to create similar scenes in looks and complexity. The tutorial scene was unique. Here you can see a map of the virtual environment on the left and a snapshot on the right. Here's the second outdoor scene. Our first indoor scene and our second indoor scene. Here's an example of a user study trial. Users start the trial with a tutorial for each locomotion technique and proceed with the task once for the indoor scene and once for the outdoor scene. They repeat the process for other locomotion technique, and in the end, they answer the final questionnaire. In each of the sessions, users explores the scene first, and then answer the pointing tasks in VR, and then the post-task questionnaire outside VR. The order of the trial was counterbalanced by systematically varying the full permutation, which was 16. For the walking task, users could explore the scene freely. They had exactly 5 minutes to do so, and they were told to collect 10 gems in the scene, while in reality there were actually 8 in the scene. And this was to incentivize exploring the scene, even though they finished exploring it before the 5-minute ends. Here you can see a top-down view of a user walking in an outdoor scene. This is from our recording of user's action. This top-down view is not what the user saw. For teleportation, we implement point and teleport method. There's no transition. Users teleport to wherever they click instantly. They have exactly 5 minutes to explore the scene, and they are told to collect 10 gems, while in reality there are 8 gems in the scene, the same as for walking. Here you can see a top-down view alongside user's perspective. User only sees the images on the left side. It's 3x playback. You can see that the user is exploring the scene and they are collecting the gems. For our tutorial, we pre-recorded the audio. It's condition-based, so if a user performs an action correctly, it will go to the next step, making sure that users learn to do the actions. It has a completely separate scene, so users won't learn the scenes that they are about to experience. And the tasks that are explained in the tutorial are the locomotion method and gem collection task, and also how to perform the pointing task. We have pointing tasks, and the goal of them is to assess users' cognitive map building. Here, we are demonstrating how a single question in the task would work. You can see the user from a top-down view on the right side. This is not what a user would experience. This is just to demonstrate here. The user would teleport to a new location, and an image is shown on their controller. You can see the user's view on the left image, and the camera image on the right side shows where that picture is taken from. So the user is asked to point towards that direction, the direction that the person taking the picture was standing. In this case, the correct direction is the green arrow. If the user in this case points towards the blue arrow, for example, based on an error, we measure that error and in degrees, and we record it as the pointing task error. Here you can see that in action. And the user has to answer 10 of these pointing task questions per scene. Now you can see they teleported to a new place and they're pointing to that direction. We had 16 participants in this study, 7 male and 9 female, average age of 19. They were mostly university students. 10 of the participants had at least some experience with VR. And the study took 1.5 hours per participant. This included the pre-questionnaires, instructions, tutorials, experiment conditions, and the post-study questionnaires. Our dependent variables were self-reported simulator sickness that we got through SSQ, Simulator Sickness Questionnaire, self-reported presence, which we got using SUS Presence Questionnaire, pointing task error, which we measured, and coverage of observed area, which we calculated after the fact using the recorded data. Here are our hypotheses. H1, natural walking will provide better spatial layout information than teleportation. H2, teleportation will include higher disorientation except when inside-out tracking fails in natural walking. And H3, natural walking will provide a higher sense of presence than teleportation. Now we're going to talk about the results. 15 users preferred walking over teleportation, and the majority of the users found walking easier to use. This is despite the fact that walking definitely was more effortful than teleportation. Our results show that walking causes significantly lower nausea, disorientation, and total score in the standard simulator sickness questionnaire. This supports our hypothesis too that teleportation would induce higher disorientation. In SUS Presence Questionnaire, our results from this Wilcoxon-Signed-Rank test showed no significant difference between walking and teleportation. The SUS score was computed as the number of answers that have a score of 6 or 7. And we additionally report the average value of all SUS questions, and in that we find some significance. This is basically a trend towards more presence in walking. We calculated the view coverage using the collected interaction playback after the experiment by casting 20 rays at 0.1 second intervals from the eye to the scene. And we did not find any significance coverage between walking and teleportation. However, we found that one of the scenes had significantly higher coverage than the others. In the pointing tasks, we performed the Wilcoxon-Signed-Rank test on effect of locomotion on pointing error. There was no significance between the locomotion techniques. We performed Friedland test for pointing task error in each of the 4 scenes, and there was some significant difference between indoor 2 and indoor 1 and outdoor 1 scene. We're going to discuss some of the points. While we show that walking has advantages over teleportation in various dimensions like preference, similar sickness, and presence, teleportation is still performed very well, like while looking at the mean values in these tests. Teleportation also allows for quicker scene traversal, although this does not mean that it's going to be a more efficient mental map building. In case of limited space, teleportation is still going to be a very feasible option. In future work, we should look into how to retain the benefits of natural walking in limited spaces. In conclusion, we designed an experiment to test and compare natural walking and teleportation as 2 main locomotion techniques in virtual environments. And our results show that walking is highly preferred over teleportation. Walking causes significantly lower simulator sickness, and there's a trend towards higher presence for walking in VR. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for the speaker. I'm checking the Hua for the question. I think no question in the Hua, so any question from the audience here? Please raise your hand. Okay.
I think there's one question in Hoover just popped up.
Okay, yeah. Okay, it's a very interesting talk. Could you please elaborate on how you measured or assessed disorientation?
Yeah, sure. So for measuring the disorientation, we use the SSQ questionnaire, and that's like a standard simulator sickness questionnaire that has a portion that is dedicated for disorientation. And it's a set of questions that users have to answer after each of the experiments. And based on that, we measure the disorientation.
Okay. Any other question from the audience here? Okay, I will ask a question. You mentioned a technique which blending in the real environment on the periphery to help user to avoid physical obstacles. Could you introduce some detail of the experiments and how do you think about this technique? Because I think that this technique is very interesting. So what do you think for this technique maybe in the future MR applications?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part of it, like to avoid the obstacles?
Yeah. You use a technique which blending in the real environment on the.
Oh yeah. So we have exactly, yeah, that's true. So
yes.
There's something that we didn't talk about in this talk because it was a formative study that was in the paper. And that was just to experiment to see like if we can like what are the ways to transfer what we learned about walking to mixed reality. That's part of the paper. If you're interested, you can look into that. But that technique is basically a trigger method that by holding the button, user would see the sides of the real. They would see a blending version of the real environment in their using the cameras on the mixed reality device. And that they can basically pick up the virtual environment that they're in, turn around, and like use their available space to walk in. That's something that we have some data from our study, but we didn't decide to publish them in this work. We're definitely working on the data to include it in another future work.
Okay. So any other questions? Okay, so
thank you very much.
Okay, let's thanks for the speaker again. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the second presentation is rock or roll locomotion techniques with a handheld spherical device in virtual reality. The speaker is David Angmeyer. Okay. David.
Hi, I'm David from LMU Munich, and I would like.
Okay, is a PhD student in human-computer interaction group at LMU Munich. His research interests include tangible interaction in AR and VR with a focus on spherical device. Let's welcome the speaker.
Hi, I'm David from LMU Munich, and I would like to present our paper, Rock or Roll, Locomotion Techniques with a Handheld Spherical Device in Virtual Reality. For this project, we wanted to explore the potential of a handheld spherical device acting as a locomotion interface for virtual reality. We constructed a simple prototype that can be held in either one or two hands. In VR, it is overlaid with a moving grid pattern, but it also can contain navigational cues such as a world in miniature. Overall, the concept should, when operated, resemble a rolling ball, although it neither in the real nor in the virtual world will actually touch the ground. Our main research goals were to find a viable implementation for a handheld spherical locomotion controller that could actually keep up with established methods. Therefore, we wanted to issue a comparison between two types of controllers, our spherical prototype and an HTC Vive VR controller. Additionally, we wanted to compare two locomotion paradigms that we applied to both types of controllers: position and velocity control, or zero order versus first order systems. Last, we wanted to explore possible benefits of a sphere-contained visualization, in our case, an enclosed world in miniature that would serve as a navigation aid. We looked into a wide array of related work, such as handheld spherical displays in VR and AR, where, for instance, we can find handheld perspective-corrected spherical displays that are implemented by projecting an image to the surface of a tracked sphere from the outside. Then, handheld spherical devices in general, ranging from trackballs to button balls or to spherical devices that are rolled on a hard surface. Subsequently, we evaluated spherical devices applied for VR locomotion tasks. We found a number of implementations using trackballs, as well as, for example, more exotic devices such as a human-sized hamster ball called the Vertisphere. Lastly, because of the physical involvement a rotating sphere would possibly induce, we looked into VR locomotion techniques by hands, such as the finger walk in place technique or various other approaches relying on hand gestures. As with previous implementations that we did with spherical devices, our prototype is based on low-cost commercial hardware. We mounted a Vive tracker to the inside of a two-piece acrylic glass sphere with a diameter of 12 centimeters. It is worth to note that for this application, due to the expected sphere's rotation, we wanted to center the tracker in a very stable position to provide a balanced and equally rigid device. This is the reason why we placed the stabilization piece right below the tracker and attached it with a countersunk screw from the outside of the sphere. For our study, we recruited 20 participants with an average age of 25.5 who had to complete 3 locomotion tasks for all controller conditions that were repeated once. Subsequently, we applied a within-subject design, so all participants had to execute the 4 controller conditions in counterbalanced order. To evaluate our approach, we mainly focused on task completion time and accuracy, as well as on subjective ratings from post-experiment questionnaires. In a preliminary study, we determined movement and rotation speeds for both types of controllers. For details on this, please refer to our paper. All conditions allowed the users to move into 4 distinct directions: forward, backward, left, and right. Movement into those directions was executed, as shown in the illustration here, relative to the vector pointing from the HMD to the controller. This, on the one hand, allows for finer movement adjustment, as well as, on the other hand, for movement independent from head rotation. The first condition, sphere position control, represents a zero-order system implementation for the spherical controller. As we can see in the video, the sphere is constantly rotated in one of the 4 main directions, and the rotation is, per frame, translated into the corresponding locomotion. Second condition, sphere velocity control, a first-order system, allows to set a constant movement velocity by rotating the sphere in one of the 4 main directions. To make the condition quick functionality would be triggered by an opposite rotation. The VR controller's implementation of the zero-order system, controller position control, requires a constant input on the touchpad in the 4 main directions, while swiping up and down on the pad would increase or decrease movement speed. The last condition, controller velocity control, again is an implementation of a first-order system. A click on the pad in the desired direction would start movement with a velocity, again set by swiping on the pad, while a click in the opposite direction would stop movement. Users had to complete 3 different tasks, increasing in complexity. It should resemble situations likely to occur in an exploratory VR application. For the first task, the straight line task, as shown in the image on the left, users had to, as quickly as possible, walk to a succession of 4 different targets, each 100 meters away from their start point. The tasks had to follow a narrow path with a length of 800 meters while trying to avoid collisions with the walls. The last task consisted of a small maze where participants could use a navigation aid in the form of a world in miniature to find their way out. For the sphere conditions, this aid was placed in the center of the sphere, while for the other conditions, it hovered above the front part of the controller. All tasks were repeated once with mirrored or rotated versions of the virtual environments. As mentioned before, we measured task completion time as well as the accuracy with which the users managed to place themselves in the center of the targets. After they reached the circular target, that was always indicated with an arrow, it would turn yellow and allow for readjustment of the position in a time frame of 5 seconds. At first, let's now have a look at the results of the task completion time record. Here we find that for the first task, the sphere's position control technique significantly outperformed all other conditions, while for the second task, the same condition was significantly faster than the sphere's velocity control technique that itself was also outperformed by the controller's position control technique. Regarding accuracy measurements, this chart shows the precision of target acquisition. For the first task, we can find significant advantages for both position control techniques. For the second task, controller position control again performed better than the controller's velocity control technique. It is also worth to note for the second task, we registered a significant higher amount of wall collisions for the sphere's position control technique. For the third task, we as before did not find any significant differences. If we take a look at the questionnaire results, we can see significant advantages for controller position control in terms of ease of learning and perceived precision, while in general, the controller conditions received better user scores overall. The same picture shows for the NASA TLX scores. Especially in terms of physical demand and effort, the sphere's position control technique that required constant rotation of the device was perceived as significantly more demanding. Lastly, here we can see an example of walking patterns for all conditions extracted from the straight line task. Although the sphere's conditions show some outliers, we did not find significantly higher deviation from the ideal line for both sphere conditions. This is in line with the overall good results that the sphere conditions received for this task. To sum up the results, we can state that sphere position control could partly outperform the controller-based methods in terms of task completion time and accuracy. The sphere-based methods could in general keep up with the controller-based methods. Only for the second task in regard to collisions, the controller-based methods were superior. However, the questionnaire results were clearly in favor of the VR controllers. And lastly, we found no significant effects for the sphere-contained world in miniature. To conclude, if we compare the two locomotion paradigms for the spherical controller, the zero-order system is clearly superior. The sphere-based method supported target acquisition, but made following a straight line slightly more difficult. Users reported higher physical involvement for the sphere-based methods, but this was also positively received as confirmed by qualitative feedback. Also, the devices indicate easy learnability since the users did not receive any instructions on how to use those controllers. Lastly, we have to note that there are still multiple extensions possible, such as using the rotation around the up axis, simulating buttons, or a further exploration of locomotion associated with virtual content enclosed by a spherical controller. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks for the speaker. And no question in Hua, and any question from the audience here? Questions? Okay. Hey, David. How do you deal with the level of sensitivity of the controller? That means if I want to move faster in the virtual environment, should I rotate the controller faster? Or how do you calibrate the sensitivity of the spherical controller?
Yes, exactly. So the spherical controller was directly coupled to the rotation. Also locomotion was directly coupled to the rotation. So if you rotate it faster, you move faster. And with this preliminary study, we determined how we would translate the rotation. So we basically determined two types of speeds, a walking speed and a running speed. So that's basically something that you find quite often in locomotion controllers. And yeah, we basically matched the speeds between these two determined speeds that we found with the preliminary study.
Okay. Okay. So I ask the second question.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Any question from audience? Okay. Okay. I think instead of a navigation in the virtual environment, could this controller be working in other conditions like the pointing or selecting object? Is that okay for that task?
Yes, so that would basically an interesting extension because EMISA's actually work on these handheld spherical perspective corrected displays being applied for selection or object manipulation. So it's possible to really implement this with a spherical device, but I think that's in combination with locomotion, that's a topic for future work, but certainly would make such a controller way more versatile than it's at the moment. Yes.
Okay. We have a question from Hua. The participants experience fatigue with a sphere.
Yes, as I pointed out in the questionnaire results, the participants rated the physical demand for the spheres higher. So that may be bad for basically using it for long term, but this was also positively reported in terms of physical involvement and feeling of presence. So it kind of has its up and downs.
Okay. So
okay, then I see another question. Is it important to use a sphere or another shape? So
okay.
I think yeah, a sphere is important if you're really going for rotation, because it obviously is the object that can be rotated most easily. But yeah, I think for other tasks, if you're not going 100% for locomotion, you could actually think of using other shapes. For example, if you want to do an alignment tasks, there are shapes with actually having planes would be maybe beneficial.
Okay. Thanks for David. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to the third one. The third presentation is eye-free target acquisition during working in immersive mixed reality. This paper is from TVCG special issue. The speaker is Qiushi Zhou. Qiushi is a PhD student in the School of Computing and Information System at the University of Melbourne. His research interests include embodied interaction in augmented reality and virtual reality. Okay, let's welcome the speaker.
Hi, thank you, Lily. Thanks, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Qiushi Zhou. I'm from the HCI group at the University of Melbourne, and I'll present our work, Eyes-Free Target Acquisition During Walking in Immersive Mixed Reality. I'm presenting on behalf of my co-authors, Difeng Yu, Martin Reynoso, Joshua Nguyen, George Gonsalves, and Eduardo Lemos. So why are we interested in ice-free interaction? Our daily interaction with the environment are primarily based on visual feedback. When we want to touch a button on the screen or to compose our body in a desired posture, we will need visual feedback of the intended target and our hands to see if we made a correct move. But in VR or any form of immersive mixed reality environment, what we can see is determined by the field of view or the FOV of the headset. For example, one of the standard FOVs commonly found on the market is 110 degrees horizontally, which means that the user here would not be able to see his own hands. Although this is a common problem found with most immersive headsets, we're limited much less by this problem in our daily life, as we have a natural horizontal FOV larger than 180 degrees. It becomes a bigger challenge when we are walking around. So imagine this user is walking in a virtual environment. His field of view within the immersive headset is defined by the red frustum here as he rotates his head. The interactive space is defined by the green sphere, which is the boundary of the reachable space around the user's body. An ideal virtual environment would provide a perfect match between the user's visual perception of the virtual environment and their bodily perception of the physical environment within reach. However, to achieve that perfect match, we're faced with multiple challenges. In the current work, we contribute to the understanding of ice-free target acquisition task performance. This is a motivational scenario of a user performing such interaction in a room-scale mixed reality environment for blueprint editing, where the engineer user can walk to the point of interest while looking at it, and at the same time grabbing one of the virtual tools without looking at it. In this study, we defined 3 factors. The first factor is a reference frame. The vision of an immersive mixed reality environment is provided exclusively by the headset, which rotates following the head movement, whereas the torso could remain still at the same time or move towards different directions. In those cases, if the user is expecting virtual targets fixed around their body as they walk around, their spatial perception of those targets would depend on if those targets follow the direction of their head or torso, as illustrated here. So our first factor of investigation is reference frame with 2 conditions: torso, where the targets rotate following the torso orientation, and the head, where the targets follow the head orientation. As we are interested in investigating the acquisition performance during walking, we realize that the effect of the reference frame would be different during rectilinear locomotion when the user walks along a street path, and during curvilinear locomotion when the user walks along a curved path. So we have rectilinear and curvilinear walking as separated conditions and added standing still as a baseline. Finally, considering the placement of the targets around the user's body, we take another factor of the distance between the targets and the user's body. This image is taken from a previous work in which the authors found that when manually acquiring targets placed around the body, the accuracy of the performance would be better when those targets are placed approximately at the maximum reaching distance of the users. We chose a third factor of placement with the preset condition in which the targets are placed at maximum reaching distance, and custom, in which the participants were allowed to place the targets themselves in slightly more comfortable locations that are closer to their bodies within a given range. These illustrations show the target's layout in our study. 6 targets are placed on each side, anchoring around the body center of the participants. The locations of the targets are chosen to be out of the FOV, but still in front of the body so that it's not uncomfortable to reach. The bottom image shows what the targets look like in the virtual environment around the participants. The first image shows the preset condition where the targets are placed at the maximum reaching distance. The second image shows the custom condition of placement, where at the beginning of the tasks, the participants could determine the exact locations of the targets by grabbing anywhere inside the larger spheres. Then, after confirmation by grabbing, each target would shrink and stay there for the rest of the study session. Our experiment conducted in a 4x4 meter space covered by optical cameras. We used the Oculus Go wireless VR headset with reflective markers attached on the front and back of the torso and the participants, and on the headset and the gloves as well. The Manus VR gloves also transmit data wirelessly. We use them to recognize grabbing gesture. For the experiment, we recruited 24 participants. We let participants practice and familiarize with all the different conditions and tasks. Then we started the tasks, which were repeated 3 times for each of the 12 targets. During the tasks, participants follow the virtual sphere floating at the height of their chests that are moving around, and the number on the sphere indicates which target they should acquire in the trial during walking. Among the total number of trials, we discarded those in which participants reacted with the wrong hand, and another 164 outliers. With the remaining data, we measured the task performance as the Euclidean distance between the target and the acquisition location in 3D space. We also measured the reach offset that reflect difference between the perceived and the actual distance between the target and the body. So the reach offset is defined by the absolute difference between the distances from the torso to the target and the acquisition locations. We also measure angular offsets to reflect the rotational acquisition errors, including horizontal angular offset and vertical angular offset. Next, we briefly discuss the results. Due to the time limit, please refer to the paper for a much more detailed discussion. Here we present all the main effects on the first row on this page, and the interaction effects in the next page. And we also plotted the signed value of the offsets on the second row. We can see that the performance during walking is always worse than during standing still. This is likely due to the body movements generated in the walking dynamics for maintaining gaze stability and gait stability. Between the walking conditions, we found that curvilinear walking produced worse performance in general. This is likely because walking in a curved path added the turning motion to the complexity of walking in a straight path, and consequently led to more error overall. For target placement, our results were in favor of the preset condition. As we can see, the offsets were significantly smaller than in the custom conditions, except with Euclidean distance. This is likely because, as previous work found, that when we acquire targets with our arms stretching straight out, we are simplifying the acquisition task from 3D to 2D problem. For reference frame, we expected the difference to come into full effect during curvilinear walking, as previous work suggested that during walking and turning, the head will turn towards the inner part of the walking path more than the torso does. And we can see that this discrepancy is only reflected in the Euclidean offset and the horizontal angular offset. And as we found out, the offset in the torso condition is significantly smaller than in the head condition. In this case, we argue that participants were able to locate the targets more accurately when they relied on proprioception than on vision. And in this case, since the targets are out of sight, the visual perception primarily relies on optic flow. However, there is no clear cut between proprioception and vision, as we use them to form mental spatial representation of objects. In fact, previous works have found that humans integrate visual and proprioceptive sensory feedback for spatial perception by following a weighted model that considers the relative reliability of the different sensory modalities. With that in mind, let's briefly talk about some of the significant interaction effects. We found 2 interaction effects between all 3 factors on the Euclidean offset and horizontal angular offset. In line with previous discussions, we interpret these 3-way interactions in light of the literature on sensory integration. In a nutshell, we argue that this is due to the complex mechanism in the weighted model followed by the sensory integration process in our brain, which we discuss in great length in the paper. Finally, in light of our findings in previous works, we provide the following design guidelines for eyes-free target acquisition in picture immersive mixed reality experience, featuring spatial mapping and full-body motion tracking. We recommend leaving a buffer zone and space around the exact locations of the targets to tolerate errors, and future designs should leave more error tolerance along the vertical axis of the targets for acquisition tasks during forward locomotion. We advise future systems to provide torso position tracking rather than the traditional head tracking function whenever possible. Future designs should arrange the targets at different angular locations around the body at a fixed distance of the approximate arm's length to minimize target acquisition error. And finally, our work is not without limitations, and here are some of them. To investigate users' undisturbed performance, we did not provide feedback on their accuracy during the study. And we also did not collect subjective feedback from the users because our study was designed out of a specific context. And future works could also investigate the cognitive effect induced by the different walking patterns alone. And that will be the end of my presentation. Thank you for watching.
Thank you,
All right.
Chu Shi.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. There is a question in Hua. Do you think the results might differ if users can see their virtual body inside the environment? In that case, the users might be aware of their torso orientation. Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks for the question. I think if when the users are able to see the torsos, here if we're talking about a third person perspective, and that will be entirely different from the context of the current study because we're interested in the immersive, ecocentric first person perspective experience, where you perceive the locations of the targets around your body intuitively with your bodily senses. And if we're talking about first person perspective, I believe that with a vertical field of view of most of the commercially available headsets, you would need to probably deliberately look down to see your torso, supposedly rendered at the exact location of your real body. And again, with that extra step of confirming the torso location with your vision, it will be different from our scenario here, where I guess it will be less efficient as with the extra step. And in terms of accuracy, I think we'll probably need another experiment to see how that would be different, and I think it will be interesting to see that. Yeah, and yeah, I think it'll be an interesting idea for future works. Thanks for the question again, and I hope I've answered it.
Okay. Any questions from the audience here? Okay. So I wonder, in the case we use the body as a reference, could user rotate their heads to find the target, which means making the target visible? If they do, should we remove this result from the data?
Sorry, I guess the question was that when during the study, when participants move their head, would they be able to see the target? Was that the question?
Yes.
Okay, so we actually didn't render the target. So in the training session, the training learning session before the actual study sessions, we let the participants see the targets around their body so they could learn the locations of them. But during the study, they cannot see the targets.
Okay. So you mentioned that in your experiment there were several targets around the user. Does any user forget the position she or he placed a target? You have that kind of case, we forget.
Yeah, that's. I'm pretty sure that there are probably some of those trials that they forgot, and that's why part of our outlier removal in the data is that we took out the data that where the participants were grabbing the targets clearly out of the place of the target locations. So that would mean they probably would have forgot. But then that's something that we can't know for sure because we can't really differentiate that kind of error from the kind of error where the participant just remembered the targets correctly but grabbed it at a different location. So we just did an outlier removal with the standard 3 standard deviation or standard error mark, and yeah, that's how we controlled for this error.
Okay. Thank you, Chu Shi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we go to the first presentation. The first presentation is the skilled walking, a suitable walking metaphor for customer VR. The speaker is Ron Mackman. Dr. Ron Mackman is the
Hello, I'm Dr. Ryan McMahon, and on behalf of my former PhD student, Dr. Ching-Wan Lai, I am presenting the cognitive load and usability of 3 walking metaphors for consumer virtual reality. Walking metaphors have been extensively researched for travel and virtual reality applications. However, only a few walking metaphors are feasible for most consumer VR systems. We present a study that compares 3 feasible metaphors: scaled walking, human joystick, and walking in place. We evaluated these 3 techniques in terms of their cognitive load, travel time, simulator sickness, presence, and perceived usability. We used a dual task study to investigate our 3 walking metaphors. Dual task paradigms involve performing a cognitive working memory task while concurrently performing a target task. In our case, this was a travel task. For the cognitive task, we employed a standard 2-back working memory task, as pictured here. This required users to press the trigger button if the current letter Q is the same as 2 Qs ago. For our travel task, we adapted the Fitts Law ISO as a travel task. As the Fitts Law ISO is seen here in the diagram to the right, we rotated the vertical selection task to the horizontal plane to become a travel task. We used semi-transparent columns as targets, and we required the user to terminate travel within the column and remain for 2 seconds in order to select that target. Like the original Fitts Law task, we had 2 adjustable parameters: movement distance, which we kept constant at 10 meters for the duration of our study, and the target width of the columns, which in our case we set to 0.5 meters in order to fit the average human shoulder width. For our 3 travel techniques, the first one that we investigated was scaled walking. Scaled walking scales the user's physical movement, and in our case, we used a factor of 3. So as seen here in the diagram, as the user physically moves forward 1 meter, they actually move forward 3 meters within the virtual environment. The second walking metaphor that we investigated was human joystick. Human joystick uses the 2D vector defined by the center of the tracking space and the user's head tracker for the travel direction and speed. It also employs a no travel zone to avoid any travel due to small deviations between the center of the tracking space and general tracking errors. And the third walking metaphor technique that we investigated was walking in place. Walking in place requires the user to step in place to virtually step forward. We set a threshold of 0.3 meters for our walking in place technique. If the user stepped beyond this 0.3 meters, then it was considered real walking, and the virtual stepping was not initiated. For our study, it was very important that all 3 travel techniques were carefully tuned to require approximately the same time to complete the travel task. Otherwise, it would have been an unfair comparison. Our scaled walking technique required a 3 times scale factor to keep the 10-meter travel task within the 4 meter by 4 meter tracking space. Hence, all 3 techniques were tuned for a target speed of 4.32 meters per second, which is 3 times the average human walking speed of what's approximately 1.44 meters per second. For our study, we used an HTC Vive system, including the head-mounted display, 2 handheld controllers, and we also used 2 additional Vive controllers, which were attached to the ankles of the user in order to track their feet for the walking in place technique. As seen here in the image, we had a truss structure with a drop cable to avoid any issues with the cable interfering with the user's movement, and we used Unity to develop our study's application. We looked at several metrics within our study. The first set of metrics that we looked at were the cognitive load metrics. If you consider our cognitive load task, there are 4 potential outcomes given a stimulus. If the stimulus is a match stimulus, one that matches the same cue presented 2 back, and the user presses the button, then that is a true positive condition. If the user does not press the button, that is a false negative condition. However, if the stimulus does not match the cue that was presented to back, and the user presses the button, that is a false positive condition. And if the user does not press the button, then that is a true negative condition. We investigated 4 different metrics here using these 4 potential outcomes, including accuracy, which is most commonly employed with the in-back cognitive task. We also looked at precision, recall, and F-measure being the harmonic mean of precision and recall. And these 3 metrics are more often commonly applied to areas like information processing and machine learning. In terms of travel time metrics, we looked at total travel times in addition to individual trial times. We used the Simulator Sickness Questionnaire to assess simulator sickness, the iGroup Presence Questionnaire to assess spatial presence, and the System Usability Scale to assess perceived usability. With regard to the procedure, all 3 travel techniques were controlled within subject. However, technique ordering was counterbalanced between subjects to avoid any potential ordering effect. Participants, we had a total of 30, including 20 male and 10 female. Their mean age was 22.4 years, ranging from 18 to 30. 27 of our participants played video games, and 15 of our participants had prior VR experience. We had several studies or several results that we've reported within our paper. However, due to the brevity of this presentation, I'm only going to cover some of the most important results. One of those results was that we found a significant effect for F-measure. As you can see here, based according to our post hoc test, the scaled walking and human joystick techniques afforded significantly better cognitive load in terms of F-measure than the walking in place technique. However, we did not find any significant differences between the scaled walking and human joystick techniques in terms of cognitive load. In terms of travel times, we found a significant effect of trial time. This is the average time taken to travel from one target within our task to the next target. And we found that the scaled walking technique afforded significantly faster trial times than both the human joystick technique and the walking in place technique. However, we did not find any significant differences between the human joystick technique and the walking in place technique. In terms of simulator sickness, we did find a significant effect for total simulator sickness based on the proper SSQ scoring. We found specifically that the human joystick technique induced significantly more total simulator sickness than both the scaled walking technique and the walking in place technique. However, we did not find any significant differences between the scaled walking technique and the walking in place technique with regard to simulator sickness. With regard to perceived usability, we found a significant effect for the system usability scale total. We found that users perceived the scaled walking technique to be significantly more usable than the human joystick technique and the walking in place technique. However, we did not find a significant difference in terms of perceived usability between the human joystick technique and the walking in place technique. In terms of the conclusions of our results, we have found that scaled walking afforded the best travel. It afforded the significantly best travel times, both in terms of total travel times and individual travel times. It was also regarded as the significantly best in terms of perceived usability based on the system usability scale totals. We found that the walking in place technique required the most cognition or cognitive load of the 3 travel techniques, significantly more than both the scaled walking technique and the human joystick technique. We also found that the human joystick technique induced significantly more simulator sickness than both the scaled walking technique and the walking in place techniques. These results are most likely due to the uncanny valley of interaction fidelity. As you can see, scaled walking, which is a full gait technique, affords a high degree of fidelity to real walking, while the human joystick and walking in place techniques, both partial gait techniques, only afford moderate degrees of fidelity to real walking. Hence, we believe that the benefits of scaled walking in terms of travel times and perceived usability, and also with regard to some of the better cognitive loads and less simulator signals is due to the fact that it yields this higher degree of fidelity to real walking. Thank you for listening to this presentation. This research was partially supported by the National Science Foundation.
Okay, thanks for Ron. And okay, I check the Google and one question here. Great work. Do you have any indication from the internal tests how teleportation will perform with your task and measures?
Yes, so we've actually done some other studies using the same methodology. Teleportation in general proves to be one of these, obviously the fastest travel techniques because it instantly moves you from one location to another. In terms of cognitive load, I would say it's slightly better than the walking metaphors. We actually hypothesized that the motor actions required with the walking metaphors may interfere with a lot of cognitive tasks where techniques like teleporting and steering don't have those physical action components. So your cognitive load is probably reduced slightly. And in terms of simulator sickness, we really haven't found a difference between teleportation and scaled walking. Although, as we saw here in the presentation, human joystick and walking in place, well, specifically human joystick induces more simulator sickness.
Okay, okay. So if I think if the task requires the user to reach to a specific location, can the skilled working technology be able to bring the user to the correct location?
It depends on the size of the virtual environment. And it also depends on the scaled walking factor. If the scaled walking factor basically doesn't correlate with the size of the virtual environment, there will be parts of the virtual environment that are inaccessible. In addition, because we were using the button press for activating scaled walking, it was possible that participants could activate scaled walking, walk across the room, basically then deactivate it, walk back, and then activate it again, and they would be able just to kind of shift the mapping between the virtual space and the physical space.
Okay, but during the experiment, could the user adjust the scaled working method and quickly to reach to the location they want to reach?
Not in terms of the scale factor itself. Basically, what happened was if they didn't have the technique activated, walking would be a one-to-one mapping. If they basically pressed the trackpad button, then scaled walking would be applied, and any of their motions would basically be multiplied by a factor of 3.
Okay, okay, thank you, Ron. Thank you. Okay, we go to the next one. The next presentation is a visual auditory redirection, multimodal integration of incongruent visual and auditory cues for redirected working. The presenter is Pei Zhonggao. Pei Zhong graduated from the Graduate School of Information Science and Technology at University of Tokyo. His research is interested in multimodal integration and redirected working. Okay, let's welcome Pei Zhong.
Hello, everyone. From now on, I would like to introduce our work on the following topic: visual auditory redirection, multimodal integration of incongruent visual and auditory cues for redirected walking. This is a work mainly concerning visual auditory integration and redirected walking technique. Redirected walking is a technique which allows users to walk in a wider virtual space within a limited real-world space. It is realized by presenting users with visual feedback that is slightly different from the actual visual feedback caused by the action of walking. So users unconsciously compensate for the gap between the intended walking path and the presented walking path, and walks along a totally different path, for example, a circle in real-world space as a consequence. Previous study investigated whether the detection threshold is influenced by the addition of sound that is spatially aligned with its visual source, and revealed that there is little difference in detection threshold between these two conditions. This result may be explained by the mechanism of visual-auditory integration during spatial perception. Human spatial perception consists of vision, hearing, vestibular sensation, and so on. However, instead of using these sensations equally, a visual dominance effect was observed in the spatial perception. Ventriloquism is a good example showing visual dominance during multimodal integration. Maximum likelihood estimation, a multimodal integration model, proposes that each modality affects the final estimate of the target object independently, and that the weight of each modality in the integration process is determined based on their relative reliability. The phenomenon of visual dominate other sensations is because of vision's high reliability. On the contrary, auditory dominance may also occur in an environment with relative higher auditory reliability. It has been shown that in real-world space and under a stable state, the mechanism of visual auditory integration of spatial perception can be represented by MLE model. Based on this, we made two hypotheses. Hypothesis 1, the mechanism of sensory integration can also be represented by the MLE model in VR space while walking. And hypothesis 2, according to MLE, effective auditory-oriented visual auditory redirected walking can be achieved by reducing the visual reliability. In order to investigate these two hypotheses, we first investigated whether the MLE model also holds for the visual auditory integration of spatial perception in VR. Then, we studied whether effective auditory-oriented visual auditory redirected walking is possible or not by applying a model to redirected walking. Experiment 1 covers the first part of our purpose. Since the time is limited, we would like to refer to the paper about the detailed information concerning experiment 1. And here we only show you with the conclusion part, which is that while walking, visual auditory integration in VR can be roughly predicted by the MLE model. And thus, auditory cues contributes more during visual auditory integration as visual noise level increased. We here want to focus on experiment 2, which is to see whether effective auditory-oriented visual auditory redirected walking is possible or not by applying this visual auditory integration characteristic of MLE. There are several methods to realize redirected walking, and here we take curvature manipulation as our target to apply MLE. Curvature manipulation rotates users' VR space for walking, and as a consequence, let users walk straight in VR space while walking in a circle in the real world space. We call the threshold of the radius, which could not be noticed by users here, the minimum imperceptible walking radius. Basically, the smaller the minimum imperceptible walking radius, the better of the effect of curvature manipulation. The purpose of experiment 2 is to see whether we can get lower minimum imperceptible walking radius when applying MLE to visual auditory redirected walking. This part describes how we apply MLE to redirected walking. First, we show our users with an object emitting visual auditory stimuli during curvature manipulation. Then, to enhance the effect of auditory cue, we applied noise to the visual cue. Then, as the user walks while applying curvature manipulation at the same time, we shift the auditory stimulus to the right side in order to see whether this could enhance the effect of curvature manipulation or not. In order to investigate the effect of our proposed method, a psychophysical experiment was designed. There were 4 conditions in total, consist of the combination of without visual noise conditions and the without visual auditory difference conditions. The right bottom condition is our proposed method. In order to investigate the detection threshold of the curvature manipulation, 9 conditions of curvature gain, which is the reciprocal of walking radius, was implemented. This is a more detailed introduction of a single experiment trial. First, our users were asked to walk along a 5-meter rail track with a train meeting sound ahead in VR space, with curvature manipulation applied. After walking, they were asked to answer the feeling of bending to the left or the right side using a 2 AFC question. In order to calculate the imperceptible threshold of the curvature gain, the ratio of user answering turned left to each curvature gain was first plotted as follows. When curvature gain is a negative value, user's walking path bends to the right side, and the ratio of answering turned left is supposed to be close to 0. And when the curvature gain is a positive value, the ratio of answering turned left is supposed to be close to 1. Then a sigmoid curve was fitted to the plotted points as the psychometric function. We took the difference between the 75% value and the 50% value as the threshold of the curvature gain. Here is the result showing the psychometric function of the 4 conditions. And here is the curvature gain threshold of the 4 conditions. We then took the reciprocal of each curvature gain threshold to get the minimum imperceptible radius of each conditions. The smaller the value, the better the effect of curvature manipulation. When the visual auditory cues were congruent, the minimum imperceptible walking radius under conditions with visual noise increased compared with conditions without noise. On the other hand, when the visual auditory cues were incongruent, the minimum imperceptible walking radius decreased when visual noise was added. This difference may be due to the reduced visual reliability of the environment using visual noise, and because the position perception of the target object is easily affected by the auditory cues. Although the effect of curvature manipulation was reduced when noise was added, when visual auditory cues were congruent, a reverse effect exceeding this reduction was caused by providing incongruent visual auditory cues that lead to the auditory dominated visual auditory integration. The curvature manipulation was less noticeable than the case when the visual auditory cues were congruent and when there was no visual noise. From the result of experiment 2, we could summarize that first, our proposed method can affect user spatial perception by introducing incongruent visual auditory cues into VR. Secondly, our method could also help lowering the minimum imperceptible radius during curvature manipulation. Conclude, in order to investigate and apply visual auditory integration characteristic in VR space, we conducted 2 experiments. We found out that the characteristic that auditory cues contributes more during visual auditory integration when visual noise level increased also holds in VR space during walking. We also found this multimodal integration characteristic promising when applied in the area of redirected walking. That's all, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks, Pedro.
Thank you.
I'm checking who. So we don't have a question in who. And if you have a question, please post on who. And any other question? Any question from the audience here? Okay, I will ask the first question. And when applying the visual and auditory integration for redirection, should the audio cues keep guiding until the redirection finished? Did the direction of the audio source change during the process.
Do you mean how we implemented the auditory cues in our experiment?
Yes, yes. They keep going to remember the user or not. That they just remember the user once or keep going remember the user until they finish the task.
Okay, thank you for your question. Before they walk, the visual cue and the audio cue are at the same point, and while the user walks, the visual cue and the audio cue just depart, and especially the auditory cue just go to the right side of the visual cue. So it keeps the right side of the visual cue until until users walk along 5 meters.
Okay.
Is that okay? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. So,
I have a question.
Okay.
Could the use of incongruent cues where the visual and audio disagree cause any issues with task performance, possibly by disrupting mental maps the user has formed of the environment?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand your question.
I'm wondering if the use of incongruent cues where things in the environment sort of disagree with each other could cause issues with task performance by negatively impacting mental maps users have formed of their local environment.
I think that's actually why we can see this kind of change in the effect of redirected walking, just because the user's map changed because of this incongruent visual and auditory cues. So I think yes, there will be some difference in the map of users.
Okay, it'd be interesting to see how much impact that has. If it's small, it might be fine. If it's large, it might require reconsideration of what redirection techniques we're using. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we can have another question. Okay, so so I just wonder what kind of the thing do you think that the visual noise there is some visual noise we need to use ordinary for the redirection. What kind of the
I think there are several situations where we can use this kind of audio cues. For example, as the environment we designed in this experiment, it was a scene in the desert, I think, and in this there will always be some sandstorms or fogs. That's the outside situation. And as for the inside door situation, for example, if the light is dim, there will be visual noise. And sorry, your question was what's the situation to use audio cues, right?
Yes.
Okay, so for example, there's a guide guiding you inside in the front of you, and there will be voices from the guide, right? So in that cases, we can use this kind of technique to redirect users more effectively.
Okay. So we have another question in the who. Just a quick question: how would the sound lag volume frequency? Is this a volume sounds or frequency sound?
Sorry, what?
How was the sound lag?
How was the sound? You mean the volume of the sound? Or sorry, I actually I didn't understand the question, but the sound is the content of the sound is an engine sound, and since the visual cue in front of the users was a train, and connect the visual cue and the other cue, we just use the engine sound. Is that the answer?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, thanks, Pedro. Okay. Okay, let's move on the final presentation. The last presentation is comparing word and screen coordinate systems in optical see-through head-mount display for text readability while walking. The speaker is Shogo Fukushima. Shogo Fukushima is an assistant professor in the Interfaculty Initiative in Information Studies at the University of Tokyo. His research interests include intelligence amplification, virtual reality, entertainment computing, and human emotions. Let's welcome the speaker.
Hello everyone, my name is Shogo Fukushima. Today I want to introduce our work comparing word and screen coordinate system in optical see-through head-mounted display for text readability while walking by my colleague and myself from the University of Tokyo. Several lightweight HMDs have been released over the past year. We expect that there will be more opportunity to view information while the text even when outdoors than on the go. For example, HMDs are being used in agriculture, in factories for work support. We also believe that there will be more opportunity to communicate via HMDs through text chat and other modalities. Thus, it is critical to address the technical aspect of presentation technique in order to improve the readability of the text on HMDs. HMDs can be divided in two main categories. One is on the left, where augmented reality is a default setting. And the other is on the right, where augmented reality is not a default setting. In here, AR means the real-world object recognition and tracking function. In the former, the text is anchored to specific word location. On the other hand, in the latter, the text is anchored in front of your eyes. There's two have different coordinate systems. Our goal is to investigate the effect of coordinate system on readability of the text. In general, smart glasses are lightweight and easy to wear, but do not have real-world recognition and tracking function as standard. Thus, text on smart glass is not stabilized. So here is a video of actual text display on clear or smart glasses. As you can see, the glass shakes as you work, and the text shakes as well. These shakes are called vertical shock. Some studies have already examined the difference between these two coordinate systems. In one research, screen anchoring and word anchoring were both implemented with a HoloLens, and participants perform a task in which they read out while walking along a specific route. No significant difference in readability was found. And for both anchoring methods, they used stabilized text display. This technique stabilizes the text even if screen shake is present. Thus, it does not include the effect of vertical shock on HMDs. This previous experiment compares screen anchoring and word anchoring. However, our approach did not account for vertical shaking of smart glasses. In this presentation, we perform an experiment to compare how screen anchoring and word anchoring perform when exposed to vertical shock. In addition, we qualify the shaking of smart glass using an IMU sensor. The purpose of the study was to investigate the effect of text display method on readability and walking. We considered using outdoor setting for this purpose, but due to the difficulty of controlling the landscape and walking speed, we conduct a study using hot treadmill. The two text display methods were implemented on the HoloLens. We selected within subject comparison since there might be individual differences in reading speed and vertical shakiness. The shakiness was measured using a IMU sensor mounted on the plane of the head. The reading material is 200 character sequence of English alphabet. This alphabet consists of strong letter set. This is used in visually acuity test, and these letters have equal legibility. By placing these characters in random order, the difficulty between the two sets is aligned. Participants read them from the top left to the bottom right. This is the experimental environment of devices. A participant walk on the treadmill at a speed of 4 kilometers per hour. This simulates walking on a firm surface. The HoloLens display takes 2 meters in front of the participant on the treadmill. The text is 75-point Helvetic font. A microphone records what participant is reading out loud, and IMU sensor measures the degree of head shakiness and gait. By using IMU sensors on repeat, we can estimate phase transition of walking. This slide shows the actual IMU sensor data. Starting from the top, this is the acceleration data of the head. Left foot and right foot are displayed. As you can see, the acceleration changed according to the working. Reading speed was calculated by dividing 200 characters by the time. NASA TX was used to measure the workload. The IMU sensor is used to qualify head shaking. The acceleration data are plotted in the graph. The Z-axis is red, the Y-axis is blue, and the Z-axis is green. We did not know which was mainly responsible for shaking, so we calculate the norm, and we calculate the range of the norm, and define it as shaking. The gait phase can be estimated from the data of foot acceleration. In the paper, we discuss the timing of gait phase and vertical shock, but because the timing for this presentation is limited, we will not discuss this matter here. This is a procedure. First, a participant practice under both conditions. The amount of the text is same as main study. Next is the baseline. In the baseline phase, the participant simply work with the HMD. No text is displayed. We measure the IMU data of the participant. The following phase are the main parts of the study. The participant is tested with one of the two text display methods and answered questionnaire. Then the participant is tested with the other text display method and answered the questionnaire again. This slide shows the results. The horizontal axis shows the IDs of the participant, and the bar graph located at the far right indicates the average value. Dark blue represents the word anchoring, and the light blue represents screen anchoring. As you can see, there is a big difference in the average value. To show how much of a difference this makes, let's look at the result for ID 8, which is close to the average score.
VOHK.
Here's the screen anchoring.
RDSGZR RRC DVOS.
And here is the word anchoring. You can clearly see that there is a difference in For workload, this graph shows the average of all the NASA TLX items. For all participants, the workload is higher for screen anchoring than for wire anchoring. This slide shows the head shaking result. The baseline here is the result of just working without text on the screen. We found that the baseline on the word anchoring was significantly larger than screen anchoring. I played a video of the ID 5 participants. As you can see, in the case of the word anchoring, the working is natural and her arms are back and forth. Why does screen anchoring make it hard to read the text? We think the one reason is shaking of the HMD. In the subject report, several of the 8 participants reported that they had tried to not shake their head under the screen anchoring condition. The other reason is increased workload. The NASA TLX results show that the workload is increased in screen anchoring. Working on reading is sustained between conditions, but the additional task of stabilizing the head allows in screen anchoring. This additional task might have affect the screen anchoring score. I will now summarize today's presentation. In terms of both reading speed and workload, word anchoring is better than screen anchoring. For shakiness, word anchoring has wider range than screen anchoring. Smart graph is useful, so we must mitigate vertical shock. Some commercially available eyeglass type eye tracker could eliminate head movement using EMU sensor and gyroscope. Most smart glass have a built-in accelerometer and gyroscope sensors. Accordingly, by using these sensors, smart glass also eliminate noise caused by vertical shock. Please also see our paper for the details on our second study using English language words instead of slow letter string, which produce similar results on reading speed and workload. You also see the gait analysis results using IMU data on the foot. In this analysis of the working phase, we identify what working motion causes periodical shaking of the head. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So I'm checking the question on who no. So any question from the audience here? Where is Shogo? Okay, Shogo, can you hear me?
Yeah, hello.
Okay, can you hear? Okay, so
I have a question.
Yeah, I will ask the first question. Okay, what kind of the thing do you think the text in the screen coordinate system may provide better text readability? Hey, Shogo, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
can hear you, Lily. Maybe he's facing some technical issues. I don't know. Maybe you can send the question through the chat. I don't know, to him. Maybe he's writing something.
Okay. So, I think we have a question in Hua, but can you check the question in Hua, Shogo? Okay. Whoa. Connect lost. Hello? Okay. So I think the Shogo Fukushima has a bad connection. So, okay, so all the questions can post in the Hua, and the authors may answer these questions later. So that's all for the session 17. And thank you all for your attendance, and thanks for all the speakers. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Lily. That concludes our last morning here in Brazil for ISMA 2020. So see you all later with the keynote of Professor Ramesh Haskar. Use this time to enjoy the virtual world, to get connections, take a walk. See you later. Thanks a lot.
David, I think Tobias was here during the talk.
Yeah, he wrote a mail.
What's happened?
Yeah. Thanks, Lily.
Okay.
I'm gonna go say hi.
Welcome to the iLearn Virtual Campus. Please sign up for a free iLearn membership on our website, check out our 7th annual conference coming next spring 2021, and let us know if you're interested in hosting events or leasing space on our campus by emailing campus@immersivelrn.org.